Two calls in a row. We don't normally give a third one in a row when someone else is calling, so I'm giving it to Dr. Megan Woods.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm very happy to take this call and to hear further from the member, because I think that we're discussing some very important issues around his supplementary order paper this afternoon in the House. There's some very complicated issues that actually I think that the level of debate around informing a number of people. So I want to join with my colleague David Parker for thanking the member for the consultation that he's done with us around the SOP that he's put up, and for the discussion that it's engendered amongst us as a caucus too, that we've been able to have. Because I think, Mr. Chairman, that actually what we're discussing this afternoon cuts to the heart of what a 21st century economy might look like, and what a high-tech 21st economy in New Zealand may look like. The 20th century in many ways in New Zealand was transformed in the 1980s by New Zealand researchers and New Zealand commercial entities in 1987 being able to protect their plant variety rights as New Zealand moved more into the international intellectual property sphere in terms of what we did around protecting our intellectual property rights. The fact that we had protectable rights around plant varieties saw Zespri invest $20 million in developing Hort 16A, which is the Kiwi Gold kiwi fruit that has gone on to earn that company billions of dollars. It saw the New Zealand Apple and Pear Board, under its various incarnations, invest similar amounts of money in apple varieties and gave us the Jazz apple. Because, Mr. Chairman, what we know is that if we are going to have high-value, high-tech, sustainable industries in the 21st century, that we do need them to be commercially viable, and we do need people to invest in that research and development. Now, Mr. Browning has raised some very interesting questions, and his first contribution, one of which I'm sure will be of many on this issue, around public good science and the role that public good science should play in our society. Public good science is hugely important, but I think it's very important to remember when we're talking about whether or not we can protect biotechnology, intellectual property, that it's not a dichotomy. It's not either or. Because, Mr. Chairman, I started talking about the transformation that the New Zealand economy could undertake in the 20th century through the protection of plant variety rights. I truly believe that the ability to have protectable intellectual property around organisms, and particularly microorganisms, in the 21st century is going to be a similar transformational boon for the economy, and something that New Zealand cannot be left out of, and something that we have to make sure that we have progressive and world-leading legislation around that can make sure it is fully capable of dealing with these situations. Now, in terms of whether or not as Mr. Browning has suggested, the fact that we might put commercial protections around knowledge will actually stifle the ability of researchers and the way in which researchers conduct themselves, and the ability for knowledge to flourish in this country, the way in which we need knowledge in this area to flourish if we are going to have the kind of economy that we on this side of the House know is our future. Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't think that protecting will do that. We have seen in an analogous situation what has happened in the fields of our traditional crop sciences around the ability to protect horticultural and arable crops, that we haven't seen a stifling of interactions. We haven't seen a stifling of the ability of researchers to get together. But something that we always have to remember is that this research happens on a continuum. The fundamental basic research is still going to be published in the scientific journals. It is still going to be subject to peer review. It's as we get down the chain and we look more at the applications of this knowledge that the protections come into place. And actually, let's think about what it is that a patent process does and what would happen if we don't have a patent process. If we don't have a patent process, what will happen is that industry and commercial entities will be less likely to let their scientists and their researchers share their knowledge and to work in collaborative ways with other, Mr. Chairman, and work with other collaborators, because what they'll rely on is know-how, trade secrets and know-how. But if they go through the patent system, then there is a clear chain of documentation. There is a clear chain that lays out the research path that has been put on, and a clear chain of who the researchers working on it is. Part of the patenting process, after all, is about making that knowledge public. We need to see whether there's prior art. We have to consider what research has happened in the past in this field. So these are things that I am confident will allow our biotechnology sector to flourish in New Zealand. And I do think that this new economy, the biotech economy, is an important part of our future going into the 21st century. So I want to consider some of the ways in which microorganisms might play a role in a 21st century New Zealand economy. One of the things that we do have to absolutely grapple with in this century is the idea of greenhouse emission, and how in an agricultural economy and an agricultural society and country we are going to manage that. Well, Mr. Chairman, bacteria and microorganisms can play a crucial role in this. The photosynthesis that happens via bacteria is so much more rapid than photosynthesis that occurs only through plant materials. And the use of bacteria is actually a way, using bacteria in our soils is actually a way for us to reduce our reliance on nitrate-rich fertilisers into our soils. There are huge environmental gains for us to be made by having the ability to use these microorganisms in our agricultural practice. But, Mr. Chairman, the only way we will get industry to invest to commercialise these products and for us to be able to use them is if they can see a viable business model that operates around them. And, Mr. Chairman, being able to protect their intellectual property for the millions of dollars of investment that they are going to need to make is absolutely vital to this. We've seen that the popular science literature is full of ways of which bacteria and microorganisms are going to be a huge part of us finding a sustainable path for the 21st century. So toxins that can usually last in soils and sands for up to 10 years can be broken down in a matter of days through the use of bacteria. Imagine what we could do in terms of cleaning up around spills if we have these high-tech, high-value products that can be used to do that. But we need to encourage industry to invest in this. Yes, our public good science and our university absolutely has a part to play. And that is something I believe in passionately, and that we need our universities to be critic and conscious and free to publish, but we also need to have the part of the chain where we can commercialise this knowledge well thought out and part of a sophisticated economy that is capable of taking us forward. And it is the ability to protect the knowledge around these organisms, and particularly even the organisms themselves. Because, Mr. Chairman, that will be our competitive advantage in the 21st century. It is our raw, natural product of our talent and our ability to work in this field and put it together with what we have always done well that will take us into the 21st century. What we know is that, and my colleague David Parker talked about in Mr Browning address, the fact that biofuels, something that we know is going to be part of the 21st century, bacteria and microorganisms are an absolutely crucial part of this technology. And without the ability to build a business model around it, to see how it stacks up and to know how it is that a company can make a commercial gain out of this, that is not going to be the way. Of course there needs to be limits on this. We need to be able to protect the ability for us to have surgical procedures and the things that there is a morality around, they need to. But Mr Chairman, the Act as it currently stands offers those protections. We do not need this amendment. All this amendment will do will stifle the ability to innovate when actually there are some very elegant solutions that have been well thought through, that have been worked hard on by this committee, are indeed in this current piece of legislation. So, Mr Chairman, Labor will not be voting for this SOP. It has been an interesting discussion, and I thank the House for this discussion.
Point of order. The Honourable Member Materia Ture. Tēnā Ms Ture.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Tēnā koe. I'm glad you're so relieved. Point of order, Mr Speaker. I seek leave of the House to amend a Green Party vote on Part 1. We mistakenly opposed Supplementary Order Paper 237 when we should have voted in favour.
Is there any objection to that course of action being taken? There is none. The vote shall be amended. Thank you. Kei te pai. I call the Honourable Member Materia Ture.